Hello and welcome to this Come to Jesus Daily devotional, where we continue in our series in the Gospel of Luke, exploring who Jesus is. And this week we're considering Jesus' temptation in the wilderness. And today's devotion is entitled, Jesus is tempted to turn stones to bread. Let's read from Luke 4, verses 1 to 4. Jesus, full of the Spirit, left the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and at the end of them he was hungry. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone." So what's the main idea in today's teaching? We must resist the temptation to believe that we can live on bread alone rather than on God's word. In today's lesson, we're going to learn to live on the promises of God's word rather than living on just food and relying on physical strength. Too often we can be thoroughly devoted to regular meals, but can be rather slack about the intake and diet of God's word. This in part is because the devil is working, as he did with Christ, to tempt us to doubt our need for God's word, the Bible. We see how the devil comes to Jesus when he is vulnerable. He's hungry. The devil strikes when and where we are most vulnerable. What's this temptation about? The devil is tempting Jesus to trust his own word over the Father's word. Jesus can use his word of command, his divine power, to change these stones to bread and prove to the devil that he is the Son of God. But in so doing, he's going to have to disobey the Father's word. It was the Father's will and the Spirit's will to lead him into the wilderness, to fast. Jesus is trusting in God for sustenance rather than in his own power and disobedience. Jesus quotes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 8, verses 2 to 3. "Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years, how to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, then feed you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Father." That's Deuteronomy 8, verses 2 to 3. You can see how that parallels this account, can't you? And in Matthew's account of Jesus' temptation includes the whole quote. Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." That's Matthew chapter 4, verse 4. This account of Jesus is meant to parallel that incident of Israel in the wilderness for 40 years. And on that occasion, they were hungry and they had grumbled and had become unfaithful to God. They had not trusted God's word to provide for them. Israel had failed to love God's word. And as he quotes this text, likewise, in the wilderness of life, we have to choose whether to love, trust, and live by faith in God and on his word. Like Christ, will we live on his word, or will we do our own thing? Will we take things into our own hands? We will only thrive in the wilderness, not by doing our own thing, but by loving and living on the food of God's word. The devil tempts Jesus to love his own word over that of the Father's the Father's will. He tempts him to misuse his divine authority as the Son of God to serve himself rather than in obedience. Likewise, the devil tempts us where we are vulnerable. He tempts us to hide or despise or mistrust God's revealed will in the Bible. Like Christ, we must know the truth and then quote it back to our doubts and temptations and the demonic powers that are behind those, and trust that God will provide in every need in our lives. So in response, like Jesus, let's not live on bread alone, but on every word from the Father. Let's learn to live on the promises of God's word with as much devotion as we give to eating food for our physical strength. May we also give devotion to God's word for our spiritual strength. We may not have the power of Jesus to turn stones to bread, but we do have the power to choose to love or be apathetic, to disobey or obey, to grumble or rejoice in God's will as revealed in the Bible. God bless you.